I'm Gavin Clabaugh. I'm Vice President for Information Services and Chief Information Officer at the Charles Stuart Mott Foundation, Flint, Michigan.
Gavin, I've been working with you for quite some time now. I know that you give a lot of thought to appropriate use of ICT, of information communication technology. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen as far as the trend over the last 5, 10 years in the nonprofit sector in relation to appropriate use? Have things gotten better? Have things stayed the same? What do you see?
As I see it, the nonprofit sector and technology have a kind of a difficult relationship. Um, from the nonprofit's perspective, I think that they constantly feel that they're out of touch, that technology has left them behind, regardless of where they are. They don't understand how it works. They're afraid of it to a little bit. And despite increasing ubiquitous nature of technology, they're never too sure that they put it to the right use. It may not be true. They may be using it very well, but they're never really sure that it fits. This is exacerbated by the fact that it's never funded, at least well, and it doesn't ever seem to be kind of fully formed, fully realized. And one of the reasons for that is that there are very few economic or business incentives built into the system that feed back to support its use within nonprofit organizations. In for-profit organizations, there's a very definite feedback loop. You invest, you improve, you increase capacity, you increase effectiveness. It makes more money. You invest until you reach a leveling point where it doesn't pay off anymore. In the nonprofit world, those technological economic forces don't work, right? Funding is a function of fundraising, not a function of efficiency. In fact, for many foundations, we may invest in organizations that do it badly because we have other reasons for the investments. Efficiency is not necessarily the driving factor, regardless of what we might say.
I've observed what you're talking about, and I hear you saying that this seems to be a constant.
It does. That no matter how far we move, we're always behind.
Okay.
To some extent, I think that's driven by consumer technology. Consumer technology has moved very quickly, and a lot of the stuff that we see and perceive that we should be doing are based on what we see in consumer technology, which doesn't scale, which doesn't adapt to quote-unquote enterprise, to organizations very well at all.
Well, it can be, though, right?
It can, but it's difficult, and it has to be thought out well.
Okay.
The prime example I use is, and we're using it now, is video technology. All right, video technology, the revolution that we're actually using right here, is that the cost of video production has dropped. But organizationally, cost was never the total barrier, right? It's production, it's quality, it's content that is the barrier, not production cost.
So let's assume we stay on the same path here over time, which we can, right? That consumer technology will continue to evolve. Interesting things will come out. Are we saying then that the real shift needs to be a shift in the headset, the point of view that nonprofits have about this stuff?
Yeah, to some extent. I think there's a fundamental shift in that this stuff is not extra anymore, right? It is not something that you do when you have a little on the side. It is fundamental to the organization. It's fundamental to how you run an organization, to how you structure your organization, and what you do within an organization. It should not be thought of as something extra in the budget. In fact, many organizations make the mistake of not actually budgeting for this stuff at all, while it should be so fundamental. It's like trying to build an organization without budgeting for phones.
Okay. All right. That's fair. That's fair.
So it should be ubiquitous. It should be built into everything. It almost should be transparent. But that said, there has to be, in my mind, some choices made not to be carried away with the latest consumer trend. Let's talk about it because it's on the table. Social networking is one of those consumer trends. It's designed for the individual. It's about individuals. How do you adapt it to the organization? Does it adapt? What's appropriate? Can an organization have a single voice? And if it can't have a single voice, what are the ramifications of having multiple voices coming out of an organization? That's tough to manage.
So, one of the reactions to this constant thrust within the consumer market for nonprofits is not to run away from the technology, but in fact, the exact opposite. To embrace it, going towards it, sometimes often too quickly.
It all boils down to what are you trying to get done, right? What's the mission? Technology should be mission driven, 100%. It's easy to say, that's very tough to do.
We've been saying that, Gavin,
For years.
for years.
Absolutely.
Why aren't we seeing as much wide adoption of what you're talking about?
The mission-driven focus.
A mission-driven focus that finds its application in the real kind of time and energy and learning that's
lots
needed.
Of reasons. One reason is that IT guys, no matter what you say, IT guys are driven by love of gadgets. Right? So you have that kind of countervailing trend. If you do have a good IT person, they're not necessarily thinking about mission. They're thinking about, boy, it'd be great to have this gadget. It's one of our favorites.
Okay, how does an organization deal with going forward with making decision-making without letting be driven by the IT guy?
Because strategy should be driven by the mission of the organization. It should be driven by the vision of what you're trying to get.
Gavin, we already know that. Yes. I'm pushing you. I want to push you a step further. You see nonprofits out there. You hear case studies. How do we make that happen?
It's real tough, but I think part
of what's the hinge that needs to be oiled here?
That management, presidents, the visionaries need to embrace and understand the impacts of technology. And so far, I think they consign that to staff. That they push it down and say, all right, we want to save the world. IT guy, tell me what we need. Do we need new laptops? And I think that there is a need for understanding. And I have to say my boss does this. He is not technological, but he has a clarity of what it can do that is frightening. You don't need to know how to plug it in. You don't need to know how to turn it on. You don't need to know how to edit video to understand the power of video. I think we have a real leadership issue because I think that leadership in the nonprofit sector tends to not want to take responsibility for that technology. They really don't. Because they're afraid of it. The ideas have to come out of the organization. They're not IT ideas. They're organizational direction. They're organizational strategy. And then what the IT guys or gals should be doing is saying, this is how we can make that happen. This is how we can use the technology to do that. We know the tools. And in fact, they're sitting in their back rooms most of the time saying, we got these tools. The analogy I used to use all the time was, because I'd walk up to within the foundation world to program staff, and I'd say, guys, I got some great power tools here. You're building houses, you're building this, you're building that. Let me show you how to use them. And they say, sorry, we can't take the time. We're busy chopping wood. And I go, but I got power saws. And they go, we can't take the time. We're busy cutting with saws. And I'm saying that there's got to be a magic kind of balance in there that says that people have to be willing to change and learn.